Hey, what's going on, guys? Rum Gaming here, back with another video. In today's episode, we're taking a look at a staple tank in WoW, and that's going to be Protection Warrior. So Prot Warrior is going to be a tank that really excels in mitigation and just kind of smashing their faces into things. So a very fun and fluid tank to play. They're really good in mobility, and they're pretty much just the jack of all trades, in my opinion. So let's start with some of the pros here. So starting with the first one, exceptional survivability, strong mitigation abilities. So you have pretty high uptime on really strong abilities like shield block and ignore pain, and this really makes them excellent at reducing incoming physical damage. And they also have a really versatile cooldowns, so really good physical damage cooldowns and really good magic damage cooldowns as well. We also have really good mobility with spells like Heroic Leap and Charge. And they also have a really high skill expression, so the game really rewards players who can efficiently manage their rage and also timing certain abilities. So spells like something like Spell Reflection, for example, it adds that additional depth that a lot of other tanks don't have, and this can be a massive advantage when mastered properly, because with something like Protection Warrior, you can completely take certain spells out of the game with a well-timed Spell Reflection, or something more related towards physical damage. If you time it correctly, you can take a whole bunch of damage off yourself that a lot of tanks don't have access to. And a lot of other tanks might have access to something similar in their cooldowns, but something like Protection Warrior, it's always up. It's very consistent, very short cooldowns. Something like a Protection Paladin, for example, has to do a whole bunch of self-healing. They're going to take the damage no matter what if they don't blow a big cooldown. So that kind of goes into the defensive consistency there. And we also have pretty good AoE threat and damage profiles. So if spells like Thunderclap, Ravager, Revenge, we have all these spells that make it really excellent to pretty much hold AoE threat. Most tanks really have that, but it is extremely straightforward on Prot Warrior, so we listed that as a pro. And one thing about Prot Warrior is, if we go into this next bullet here, is they're very durable in high physical damage scenarios. So with spells like Shield Block, they handle heavy hitting melee bosses and trash mobs very effectively, better than a lot of other tanks in the game. But to counter that, on the opposite side, you can see on the first bullet point in cons, weak against magic damage. So while they are strong in physical damage scenarios, they are a little bit weaker in magic damage. Sure, they do have Spell Reflect, but when Spell Reflect is on cooldown and there's a whole bunch of just consistent dot sort of rot damage going out, Prot Warrior will suffer a little bit more than other tanks. And then before we jump into the rest of the cons, we have one more pro here. So we have our shouts, and this is our form of group utility. So we have Battle Shout for the extra attack power, and then Rallying Cry, which will give our party a little bit of additional health. So it can be a pretty clutch spell. And then going into the cons, so sure, while they do have high skill expression, they also have a high skill floor. You do have a resource that you have to manage, and if that is messed up, you will take a lot of damage and potentially kill yourself if you're not efficiently managing your rage. Another con is we don't have much passive healing really, so it's nothing like a Blood DK. It's not going to be anything like a Protection Paladin where you take damage and you kind of heal through it. If you get low on health, you're in a bad position, right? Something like a Blood DK, for example, can just death strike their way out of a bad situation. You can't. You have to prevent yourself from getting to that low health threshold. We also struggle in spread encounters, so we're really good in clustered fights, but when mobs are kind of spread out and a bunch of casters are all over the place, it's kind of hard to group everything together. Again, going back to DK, we don't have like a mass grip to bring everything in. So a slight con there. And then another major con here is we don't have major group utility. So we don't have a Lust and we don't have a B-Res. So maybe one day Warrior will get something. But right now they're kind of left behind in this department. However, with all this being said, they're still A tier. They're one of the best tanks at the moment. Okay, so taking a look at some of our utility here. So number one on the list is going to be Shockwave. Shockwave is going to be really good at being like an AoE stop for us, and it's going to be really strong with Rumbling Earth. That's going to grant us a whole bunch of range, and also has a very short cooldown, 25-second cooldown as well. So really reliable stops. We also have Intervene, which you're not going to be using it too much, but there are scenarios where you need to intervene an ally and you can kind of protect them. You can also use this for mobility, just to kind of move around to avoid mechanics. We also have Rallying Cry, which we kind of talked about earlier. So pretty clutch spell, going to give your party 10% temporary maximum health for 10 seconds. Up next, we have Spell Reflection, which is really OP because you can completely reflect a spell, which is really good in high keys where, you know, some of these bolts that are coming at you are doing, you know, tons of damage. I don't say millions, but tons of damage, right? And you can completely reflect them. So it doesn't matter the key level, you reflect that entirety of that spell. So that's very strong. And then also the 20% magic damage reduction is very strong. Now, unfortunately, once spell reflection is on cooldown, you are pretty susceptible to magic damage. So there are weak auras out there that will tell you kind of when to press this button, when's going to be an ideal time to use it. So go ahead and look that up online. There's a whole bunch of them. That will take a little bit of the thinking out of it. We also have a Stormbolt, and we also have a Shield Charge here. So these are really strong single target stops. You can see that Shield Charge will stun the primary target. So will Stormbolt, a 30-second cooldown, a 45-second cooldown. So if you pair these two spells with, like, just say, for example, your Pummel or also your Spell Reflection, you can avoid a whole bunch of spells and have a ton of stops, just like general cast going off. So if there is a priority mob that you guys really need to lock down, Prot Warrior can normally handle that. They can lock down that one specific mob for an extended period of time, assuming that mob can be stunned. And then finally here at the bottom, we have a Battle Shout on a 15-second cooldown, and this is just going to be, again, our party buff for that 5% attack power. All right, let's talk a little bit about stats here. So obviously it's going to be eye level over just about everything. We want more strength. The more strength we have, the tankier we are. All of our spells, all of our mitigation scales with eye level and strength, so make sure you're focusing that. Up next is going to be haste, and haste is very important for us because this reduces the global cooldown, which increases rage generation. So the more rage we have, the more damage mitigation we have. So we want to be pressing our abilities as fast as we possibly can so that we can generate as much rage as we possibly can. This also increases the availability of our shield block as well, so very, very important. Then critical strike is going to be pretty good from an offensive standpoint. It's probably not the best on the list from a defensive standpoint. Now, crit also does increase our parry chance as well, so it does have some defensive benefit there. So don't get me completely wrong, but critical strike is probably more used for the offensive side of things. But the problem with relying on parry chance is it only has a chance to happen. It's not a flat damage mitigation, so that's kind of where versatility comes in. So verse is going to be both a plain damage increase and damage reduction, just a flat percentage. So just a pretty good all-around stat. A lot of people say crit equals verse, so you know you can go back and forth between these two, just kind of depending on you know what you see fit. If you want a little bit more damage, go crit. If you want a little bit more mitigation, go versatility. And then finally we have mastery. So our mastery increases both the chance to critically block and a base block. So this is really good because this increases our overall damage mitigation. But the problem with this is it doesn't affect anything like a dot or a bleed. So that's why it kind of falls low on the list. It's only good for physical damage. So that's why it takes the last spot on our list. So these are the talents that we're currently running. I will put an import in the description of the video, so make sure to check these out. Okay, let's talk about some general tips here. So what you want to be doing is you want to be reacting to Shield Slam procs as much as you possibly can. This is going to be one of your highest priorities. So when Shield Slam procs, this is going to allow us to generate a whole bunch of rage and allow us to keep our ignore pain up. You also want to avoid wasting rage, so rage management is going to be very important to us. So just make sure you're using that in a smart way. You want to be prioritizing rage towards mitigation when you can. And you also want to be sending your cooldowns. I mean, you have, as Prot Warrior, you have a ton of very short cooldowns, so make sure you are utilizing them. Okay, let's talk about just your general priorities. So we have a lot of things on the screen here that's happening. Let's just kind of start out with sort of your burst combo. So you're going to be using Ravager, Avatar, and your Champion Spear all together typically in one big burst window. So you're going to be using Ravager on cooldown, Avatar on cooldown, and then Champion Spear. So they all share very similar cooldowns, so it shouldn't be too hard to pull off. And you can also throw in a shield charge if that does align. And the reason for this is if we go down to Avatar the Storm, casting Avatar grants you 2 charges of Thunder Blast and resets the cooldown of Thunder Clap. So Thunder Blast is like an enhanced version of your Thunder Clap. And then while Avatar is not active, Lightning Strikes have a 10% chance to grant you Avatar for 4 seconds. So we have a chance to just kind of randomly proc Avatar through our Lightning Strikes up here. So just know when you're in Avatar form, essentially send your big cooldowns. Now we have lightning strikes here. So while avatar is not active, lightning strikes has that 10% chance to grant our avatar. So if we look up here at lightning strikes, look at the protection section, damaging enemies with thunderclap, revenge, or execute has a 25% chance to also strike one with a lightning bolt. And these bolts will occur 30% more often during avatar. So lightning strikes by themselves aren't super strong. However, if you look at burst of power, this talent here, lightning strikes have a 50% chance to make your next 2 shield slams have no cooldown. So the reason you want to keep shield block up in step 3 all the time is because it increases our shield slam damage by 30%. So you want to make sure that those shield blocks and shield slams are synergizing with burst of power here, because you want to make sure that those 2 instant cast shield slams have that 30% increase damage on them from shield block. And just know that basically you're going to be getting these instant cast procs of shield slam, and that you want to make sure that they're buffed by that shield block. That's really all you need to understand there. Demo Shout's going to be really strong. Use that on cooldown to take less damage from enemies. We have Ignore Pain, and this is where the rage, what's the word I'm looking for here? Rage management kind of comes in. And you want to be using Ignore Pain at around 60 to 80 rage. And you want to make sure that Ignore Pain and Shield Block are up almost all the time, as much as you possibly can. This is where most of that damage mitigation is going to come from, is these 2 spells here. We kind of talked about step 6 already. So, use that in alignment, I guess you could say, with Ravager, Avatar, and Shield Charge. Step 7, a Thunder Blast. We've not talked about this. This is a talent up here in the top right. Your next Thunderclap becomes a Thunder Blast that deals 40% increased damage as Storm Strike and generates 2 rage. So this is going to proc from our Shield Slam, and basically it's just an enhanced version of our Thunderclap. So if this does proc and you have 2 or more targets, go ahead and press it. If you're just on a boss, just basically cross this off your list. From here, we have Violent Outburst, which we've not talked about yet. Kind of look at that here at the bottom. Consuming 30 rage grants a stack of Seeing Red, which transforms at 8 stacks into Violent Outburst. This is going to cause your next Shield Slam or Thunderclap to deal 200% increased damage, generate 100% more rage, and grant Ignore Pain. So when this gets to 8 stacks, you can basically proc it with either Shield Slam or Thunderclap. So this is something that you want to be tracking. You can probably track this with a weak aura. Make sure that you know how many stacks you have. Once you get to 8 stacks, you can synergize that up with either a Shield Slam or a Thunderclap, and that's going to be a very nice burst of damage and resources, and you also get that charge of Ignore Pain, right? Outside of that, not too much really going on here. Shield Charge on cooldown, Shield Slam, keep pressing your buttons. If there's nothing else to press, you can use Revenge to apply your deep wounds here. Revenge also has a chance to proc Shield Slam. That's going to be through our lightning strikes here if we read it. Thunderclap, Revenge, Execute have that chance to summon that lightning bolt. Again, the lightning bolt through burst of power has a chance to proc the Shield Slams. And then finally, if there's nothing else to press, then you can also press Execute. Again, procs lightning strikes, so it's okay to press it. Okay, and this is going to be our tier set bonus, so 2 set and 4 set. So when your Shield Slam cooldown is reset by Strategist, you gain Expert Strategist, increasing damage of your Shield Slam by 5%, reducing all damage taken by 3% for 6 seconds. So this is one of the reasons why we want to prioritize Shield Slam and get those resets as much as we possibly can. We don't overlap those resets because we get that increased damage and reduced damage taken. So we want to be getting Shield Slam on cooldown. We want to be resetting that cooldown as much as we possibly can. And then the 4 set here, Shield Slam critical strikes increase the damage dealt by Thunderclap and Revenge by 10% for 8 seconds. Okay, then a couple macros here. This should be the last slide. The first macro here is going to put both Intervene and Charge on the same button. And based on whether you're hovering an ally or an enemy, it's going to change to the specific spell that you can charge to. Or excuse me, I guess the specific target that you can charge to. Up next, we have our Heroic Leap. That's just going to cast Heroic Leap at wherever your cursor is. We also have a macro here to combine your Shield Slam with your Ignore Pain. So this can kind of help out with a button bloat. We have a at cursor for Champion Spear, so very similar to Heroic Leap, just throw the spear at your cursor. And then finally, a macro down here to combine both Thunderous Roar and Champion Spear into one button. Okay guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one.